Hey, what's up YouTube? LoftonTcg here bringing you another video. This time we're going to be discussing Nationals in North America that is coming up this weekend. And what I personally think is going to do well, going to do bad, what to expect, and how to survive this just dreadful journey. So first things first, I just want to talk about what I think the decks are that are going to be available to play that will have a great shot of winning or even performing. I've got 12 decks in front of me right here that I think all have a great chance of just surviving through Swiss and making it in the top cut. Nationals is going to be a top cut to 64. A lot of X3s can make it in and can even win the event going X3, but first off, we got p.u.n.k, Therion, and p.u.n.k Synchro. I'm just gonna name these first, and then we're gonna go through what their strong suits are. And then we have ABC, Therion, Despia, Marincess, Sword Soul, Floowandereeze, Salamangreat, Striker, and then the plant deck, Ignister, and Eldlich. So that's honestly 12 decks that I've sat down and thought of that I'm like, yeah, if any of these are in the finals, I'm not going to be surprised that it made it through this way. Majority of these decks is a super huge trend here. Majority of these decks here are actually playing a lot of hand traps right now. So what that tells me is that we're in such a combo heavy format that hand traps are the only solution. And being in North America especially, we're generally a much bigger combo-oriented region. We don't generally like to sit on multitudes of traps and haul out a long game. We really have been known to just get in there and try to get the game done. And it's just funny because a lot of these combo decks have such a low engine count. Like a lot of their a lot of their engine cards can get the job done with a very low count of engine cards, leaving them room to play anywhere between 6 to 12, sometimes 15 hand traps. Like, I know, for example, I've been playing Marincess for the past few weeks, and Marincess can easily get away with 12 hand traps and even push to 15 hand traps while just going a little bit above 40. Your p.u.n.k variants are playing hand traps. Your, like, the p.u.n.k Therion deck, even playing Gamma. So that card's crazy right now. The only decks that aren't playing an insane surplus amount of hand traps, I would say, are probably Despia and Eldlich. And they're still at least playing Ash Blossom. Some Eldlich players honestly aren't even playing any. So that might be the only saving grace as far as no hand traps goes. But trap cards are definitely more powerful than hand traps anyway, so they don't even care. And then Floowandereeze, I think that's the next runner-up because I think they're just playing D-Shifter and Ash Blossom at most. Nothing else can really get in there to do anything. So we're really looking at a predominantly heavy hand trap Nationals this season. I think some of the hand traps right now that are actually going absolutely crazy could potentially be DD Crow and Ghost Ogre. I think they're a little bit slept on, but I think right now Ghost Ogre is probably my favorite hand trap for this format. Mostly because you're going to hit cards like Fateful Adventure, Hockey Fibrax, and a lot of the Marincess starters revolve around, summoning Blue Tang, getting to your Link monster. But you ogre that, and essentially their turn is super close to ending if they just don't have another extender. So I think this field will be heavily played by Marincess as well, just because it is a good option to combat the combo decks. So like back then we had Salamangreat during Thunder Dragons, and a lot of people, we had a weird triangle going on there with the decks, but a lot of people would play Salamangreat, and Salamangreat would have a great matchup against Thunder Dragon because of being able to have the recursion from the graveyard and being able to have hand traps. And that's kind of what we're in right now, that I personally feel. So like playing Marincess right now, having 12 to 15 hand traps to kind of soften the blow if you have to go second against those heavy combo decks. And if you're going first, you have about 11 to 13 water monsters that are essentially going to start your entire combo off. So you get the best of both worlds in that. So I think cards like Ghost Ogre can be crazy, and I think cards like DD Crow can be crazy. Because obviously DD Crow is going to be crazy against Marincess if they're trying to special summon a monster back or add a card back. And as well as hitting that the Punk monster, the level 3 tuner, when they're trying to bring that back off of their synchro play. I think that is equally as strong. I don't really want to talk too much about the Punk decks, honestly, but the biggest thing you should know is their inboard is they're just trying to Scythe Lock you and then kill you their next turn. And it has a huge success rate of happening. They can do it with almost any combination of cards, which is kind of the scary part. So with the trade with that is they don't have much follow-up. They don't have a strong follow-up. So if you can mitigate that, or you can make sure you're not getting scythed, and you can whittle their board down a little bit, you're going to have a much, much, much higher chance of just absolutely crushing that deck, especially in a game 1 situation, because you're not going to have to worry about anti-spell. I think Sword Soul's a crazy deck right now too, because it can also play a lot of hand traps while still being super, super strong and explosive. That's a deck that essentially says, hey, I've got 2 hand traps and I'm going to put 85, 86, 9,000 damage on board. I'm gonna crack your board, and especially the burn 12 just consistently too. If they get to go first and they end up going Long Yong and they end up on Sovereign with Chi-Chow, You're taking that 1,200 from that Long Yong, and then you're taking 1,200 for the first spell. It all racks up. They put you on a super fast time clock, while still having probably above average recursion rates too. The hand traps that are definitely going to be affecting them the most is Nibiru, but Nibiru is generally best or only good if you have effect negation to go with it in the forms of an effect veiler or infinite impermanence, because almost every time a Sword Soul player is rushing to get Baron as their 5th summon, if they're going to be extending that far. Some Sword Soul players out there are absolutely crazy though, and they're just saying Nib's not a card, so you might get a win on that just by dropping the Nib and not having any effect negation. But Nib is definitely the most impactful card against that deck. They're not without plays if you nib them, though, because you are going to be giving them a token, and they are able to continue through with a 10-yi line. It did get a little less harsh on us, though, because we do not have Auroradon anymore. So the Hulk line Auroradon combo is not obviously existing. So sometimes nibbing them and leaving them with a token is good enough to just end their turn. Floowandereeze. Now, if you guys follow me on Twitter, you guys have me on Facebook, you know that this deck, I am just absolutely despised by this deck. I have absolutely no reason why this deck gets to exist. And off topic, it just came out to Master Duel, and Master Duel has 3 Maxi and Vanity's Emptiness. So imagine if we had that right now. Floowandereeze is a pretty simple deck. Very streamlined, the exact same play over and over again. They're looking for map, they're looking for a bird, they want to put M-Pin on board, they want to put the trap set so they can play on your turn, so they can normal summon, special summon during your turn, essentially. And put a wind barrier on board and just lock you out of the play. So, again, it's kind of like Scythe locking. Is it Scythe? No, but am I going to be able to special summon any of my monsters? No. So, essentially, I'm locked out of my extra deck anyway. So cards that are going to be helping against that, not necessarily are going to be hand traps, because a lot of your hand traps are dead against that deck because of Shifter. But the only 2 hand traps that are viable against that deck are Imperm and Ash Blossom, because again, Imperm doesn't care, it doesn't need to go to the graveyard to activate, and Ash Blossom doesn't need to go to the graveyard to activate, so it is unaffected by D-Shifter. Cards like Effect Veiler or Ghost Ogre, they must be going to the graveyard, so they're not as reliable against that matchup. Can they work if they don't have D-Shifter? Absolutely. Am I just maybe the unluckiest person ever, and every time I've ever played against Floowandereeze, they've had D-Shifter? Again, absolutely. But if you're out there wilding against Floowandereeze and you're never having to stare down a D-Shifter, and your Effect Veilers and your Ghost Ogres are working for you, keep going with that. I hope nothing but bad for Floowandereeze players every day of the week. So I think the ideal strategy is back row removal, because if you remove them, if you eliminate the chance of them activating the trap card and resolving the field spell on your turn, like if you hit it during the standby phase because their trap card can only be activated during the main phase, they're just going to have an impen on board, and you're just going to have to play around that. There's nothing else that they're going to be activating or being able to activate. Because the map also triggers on your normal summons and it lets them play. So you get rid of those 2 cards during your standby phase or draw phase with cards like Twin Twister or Cosmic Cyclone. The matchup is going to be way easier for you. I don't really want to get too far into Striker and Salamangreat because we've already had a format where those decks were just at their absolute prime. We've all kind of been through it. They're just kind of they're kind of weaker. I would say Salamangreat is just the weaker version of Marincess right now, and I would 100% think that people have just moved off of Salamangreat and moved to Marincess. Like, if you genuinely liked playing Salamangreat, there is absolutely no reason to not be playing Marincess over Salamangreat right now. Imagine your Balinks could search the field spell and circle. That's what Marincess is. So I don't really want to talk about it too much because they have the same play style. But moving on to Sky Striker, again, I don't think it's a super powerful deck, but it is a deck that plays Mystic Mine and can operate on just Hayate attack. And sometimes that's all it takes to win a game. Life points hit 0, doesn't matter how it hit it. Life points hit 0, you lose. So back row removal. Simply that. Your hand traps are not going to be as effective. Because, like, honestly, ashing and engage to stop them from searching and drawing doesn't feel good if they just put Mystic Mine on the board right after. It doesn't. So heavy back row removal to mitigate that Mystic Mine hitting the board is going to be what's going to do it for you majority of the time. Sky Striker players are definitely hiding behind Mystic Mine, and they're not ashamed of it either. I'm going to jump on Ignister here right now just because I played it at a regional, the last regional that I played at. I've always liked Ignister. I think it's fun. It's a nice 1-card combo deck that also gets to play a low engine count and play hand traps. Now, the only reason why I played Ignister for that regional is because Marincess wasn't out. Same concept, Cyberse Monster, 1-card starters. I mentioned it earlier, so I'm just going to talk about it now. Nobody should be playing it because Marincess is around. Like, listen, I think Marincess is a crazy deck right now, but the pro to Ignister that Marincess does not offer is a Walking Towers. Now, the Walking Towers is the difference because the only way the Marincess can get a tower-like monster on board is if they use Crystal Heart and have the field spell up. So that turns their monster and their extra monster zone unaffected by all your opponent's card effects. Once you out the field spell, though, that monster is now affected by everything. The towers in Ignister is always unaffected, and it either comes out most of the time 4,000 to 3,000 attack, sometimes 5,000 attack. There's not a lot of anything that's going to be outing a 5,000 attack towers right now. The only thing that generically can is usually Access Code Talker to 5,300, but they do have a quick effect negate in their graveyard, Ignisters do, that'll essentially, after resolution of Access Code Talker gaining 5,300 or 3,000 and putting it at 5,300, they're going to negate its effect and it's going to go back down to 2,300. So they're not going to be able to out it, or nobody's going to be able to out it with an Access Code Talker majority of the time. With that being said, the only other thing that can really out it a 5,000 attack towers is Starving Venom Dragon, because Starving Venom Dragon does not affect the monster, it just gains the attack of the monster. So that's going to be a hard hit on a lot of people if they just have to stare at a 5,000 attack towers too. So there is still some strength in playing at Ignister. I just don't think the deck should be played right now because it's a very fragile deck, and majority of decks are playing anywhere between 9 to 12 hand traps right now. So also the deck has a very hard time playing around Nibiru. That is definitely a deck that's more affected by Nibiru than probably anything else on the list right now. And then we have Eldlich. So I just say Eldlich because it has Eldlich cards, but we're going to differentiate between Eldlich and Branded Eldlich. I think Branded Eldlich, I might be a bit biased, is definitely a better deck. You just have a lot more play line with it. Branded Fusion's insane. You get to send you get to also just send your Eldlich monster. So there's that. There's nothing else more to say about that because it is a trap deck, and that is a deck that it doesn't search their engine cards. Like you search your Eldlich traps with your other traps, but like they're all streamlined. Like, you still have to set them and wait a turn to play them and whatever. Like, those are not the threatening cards of the deck. The threatening cards of the deck, is more of my point, are Skill Drain. There can only be one. Anti-Spell. Cards that your opponent just has to draw. And if your opponent just draws their non-engine cards that beat your engine cards, there's just really not much more you can do. Like, there's not. And obviously, back row removal, cards like Red Reboot, cards like Evenly Match are going to be huge blowouts to them. But they're also playing cards like Solemn Judgment. So that's just going to be a rough one, honestly, for anybody. I don't think anybody likes playing against trap card decks. I don't think anybody likes playing against trap cards, especially Floodgate trap cards. Because, we had True Draco going around for a while. Nobody liked playing that. Nobody liked playing against that. And, that kind of cycled out. We were doing fine as a community. And then, boom! Eldlich. So the best way to hinder that deck is, honestly, Red Reboot would be crazy. Red Reboot, Evenly Match, your Cosmic Cyclones, and your Twin Twisters are going to be your best bet to combating that. Hand traps don't really affect that deck too much. Game ones, if you have your Ash Blossom still in, or if you even do keep Ash Blossom in, you're going to be able to hit the Branded Fusion. You're probably going to think you're playing against Despia, and they're going to set 4 cards, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. And then obviously your Sanguine, the trap card, ashing, that's really good too. Just anything to avoid putting a Golden Lord on board. But this comes back to what I was talking about earlier, DD Crow. I think DD Crow is absolutely crazy against that deck. I think DD Crow has applications right now in this format. I would go as far as saying I don't see why DD Crow is not in everybody's deck in some amount. And the last deck that I really don't know too much about, because I've not played against it, I've not seen anybody play it, and I've only seen maybe 2 replays, is the Plant deck, the Sun Avalon deck. I haven't seen it in any top cuts, honestly. I think it has over out east in some of their nationals, but it's just not strong enough to have a massive representation. So I don't personally think it's a deck that you should be scared of. I don't think you should honestly. I want to say you don't. I don't think you should respect it, but the deck can combo off. And it's just a deck that sets up a bunch of negates. And with that being said, DD Crow is crazy against that deck too. Gamma's crazy against the deck, but DD Crowing their vanilla monster that kind of starts and facilitates all of their plays is a huge plus. I just don't see that deck having massive representation for this format. I just haven't been seeing it a lot of places, and if it has been having massive representations against across the other nationals, it's not doing too well. Just because there could be 50 people playing the deck out of a 100-person tournament, and if only one of them top, just because it's represented doesn't mean it's good. So I don't think that deck is anything that's going to be scary right now. All right, and then obviously I saved my favorite for last, Despia, branded. The deck is definitely in a weird spot right now, especially with the huge target that's on its back. We had three YCSs, so this is pre all the nationals. We had 3 YCSs and 2 Despia decks, one, and then the third one lost in the finals. So definitely a strong contender for nationals. I think it's just in such a weird spot with how many hand traps a lot of decks are playing, and with Scythe running around. The deck obviously can't function without the extra deck, and I would say probably 90% of the playing field, its main deck, are just built to punish decks like Despia. I think the deck is still strong, but the best way to stop that is obviously Ash Blossom, DD Crow, Ghost Spell. Those cards are obviously crazy. They're crazy against the deck. There's nothing more I can say about it. I think the deck has the highest potential of breaking boards than any deck in the game right now. Just being able to utilize Chimera and Mirror Jade to potentially just clear 3 cards themselves can be game ending. Now, the plus side of Branded, of Despia, is the follow-up and the grind game. They have a great follow-up, probably the best follow-up that any deck can have right now, and one of the craziest follow-ups I have seen in the game in quite a while. So that is definitely the strong and saving grace of the deck. I think if you don't lock out Despia turn 1, you are going to be and will be in trouble. So you definitely have a high chance of seeing that deck at Nationals this weekend. Another strong aspect of that deck has always been Super Poly, but since we have shifted into such a diverse format, decks like Marincess, Floowandereeze, Sky Striker, the p.u.n.k stuff, they're not generally affected by Super Poly. You're not getting a huge value out of Super Polying any of those decks, which essentially put a nerf on Despia. Because with less people playing decks that are affected by Super Poly, one of Despia's best blowout cards, which being Super Poly, has now taken an inherently nerfing Despia as a whole. So I think Despia's in a weird spot. I think there's probably a really great way to play Despia right now. But with Nationals being this weekend, there's probably not going to be a lot of people trying to take that chance of trying to figure out that deck. Because this is our first Nationals in 3 years, I believe. Maybe 2. But I'm going to say 3 for the video's sake. Fact check me later. I don't think a lot of people are willing to travel to take that risk to try to figure it out, to try to get Scythe locked for 3 games and their tournament experience is over. So that's how I feel about Despia right now. Alright guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I wanted to make I wanted to make this profile just before the national season started, or the national event started. Today's Wednesday, so we have to have our deck list turned in Friday by 10 a.m. and no lists can be changed. So I hope maybe this video put some perspective into some of my viewers. I took a poll on Twitter to see if this would even be worth just putting out there, and I got a lot of positive feedback for it. So that is exactly why it is here. Thank you guys so much for supporting lately. I think I'm like right over 1,600 subscribers on here. We're over 6,000 followers on Twitter. I love interacting with you guys so much. It's so awesome just being in the community. And if you guys see me this upcoming weekend, please come say hi to me. Get a picture with me if you really want to. I want a picture with you, actually, as a matter of fact. So let me know what you guys thought about this video. Negative comments, always appreciated. Positive comments, whatever. I learn more from negativity than I do positivity, but if you guys have some positive words, leave it down in the comments and we can go from there. Thank you guys for tuning in.